Michelle Loxton is here with us in the studio. Michelle, let me ask you about this. This is the UAE's new child protection law. As I said at the top of the programme, comes into effect on June the 15th. What do we need to know here? Because the launch is soon.
It is soon. So today I've been speaking to people who are in the business of protecting children. They've been working with this law, and they said the biggest change with the child protection law is that the UAE residents will all have to play their part. What they're saying is that we can no longer turn a blind eye to stuff that's happening in our community, stuff that's happening in that apartment next door, because we can't just rely on the government or the police and say, no, it's their job. It's their job to keep the children of the UAE safe. It's the authorities' job. So David Cannon is the Executive Director of Strategy and Relationship at Austability. It's a child protection company. He says that all of us have a role to play.
One of the things that really jumped out at us, and we think it's a very good step forward, is in relation to how different organizations, agencies, individuals, everybody concerned with children must come together and collaborate. You'd find that many organizations try to say, look, this is not our jurisdiction or this is not our problem, but for us what really stuck out through this law is the fact that there's a big emphasis on collaboration and working together as a community to ensure the safety and well-being of children. And everybody must play their part. When it comes to reporting suspected cases against children, every organization now has to be accountable and take responsibility and play their part in order to provide children with a stable platform. You cannot simply look to the government or the police or the other agencies to protect children. It has to happen from the core of communities, which is the community itself, the family, the schools, and so forth.
And he's right, of course, because authorities can't have their eyes everywhere.
Exactly.
So it is a collaborative effort. So that's going to be the biggest change. And it's coming into effect June 15th, so that's very soon, in a couple of weeks' time. Just talk us through a couple of the other challenges that they're expecting.
Well, that's something I asked David about. I said, what are these challenges? And he said it's going to be the mindset. Will people be open-minded enough to accept these changes? Will you accept your role? And he says human instinct is going to be a problem.
Our way of life is based on what we know. And when something new is introduced to it, you need to have that openness of the mind in order to accept the change and embrace it, especially when it's something as important as this. So I believe that the biggest challenge we will still face is individuals and organizations accepting responsibility and accepting that, look, we now have to adjust and adapt and move forward. And they can be overcome very easily via advocacy, talking about it and not letting this subject become yesterday's news.
That's David Cannon. He's the Executive Director of Strategy and Relationship at Austability.
Michelle, the impact, the challenges, the mindset changes that we need to employ, if you like. But let's talk a little bit about the law, the details behind it's Wadima's law, isn't it?
Yes, Wadima. And what we know is that the law has been set and it's currently being distributed to all the relevant authorities. And what we heard in the news recently is that 33 government entities got together basically to learn, what is your job? What is your job there at the Dubai Police? What is your job there at the Dubai Health Authority? What is your job? And they've learned things about mechanisms, about providing protection. What are the criminal penalties incurred by violators? They're also going to learn, how do we connect? Okay, we've got a child here, how do we make sure that we get her to the right place? How do we report this? So it's still, we don't have all the details because it's being circulated within government. What happens June 15th is that executive orders are issued so that the rest of us can truly know those dotted I's and crossed T's, exactly what the child protection law. But we've got a taste of it, and today we've learned a little bit about changes and challenges. But come June 15th, we get the full understanding of what the UAE's child protection law is.
Okay, and the issue really, from what the experts are saying, is it's a sense of, I don't know, I suppose shared responsibility that we have to put into place here.
And that, he said, that's a challenge and that's a change. Is that, so how often have you heard, I don't know, if someone shouting next door, or have you seen someone in a mall smacking their child? You think that's inappropriate? Or what? Have you ever turned a blind eye? Well, you won't be able to anymore, because you as a community, you as a organization, you as a government representative will now have a responsibility because of this law.
And you have to get that through to people. It's funny, I was walking into a mall yesterday and a lady was shouting at her son, and my son and me were walking through, and he was thinking, he said, oh, it's a bit like my friend so-and-so, that's the way his mum is. And I thought, it stood out to him because it's not how his parents are. The issue here, as much as anything, is differences culturally, the way people treat people, and I don't quite know how that's going to... So it's a really difficult human issue.
That's something that David and I spoke about. You didn't hear that there, but we come from all different cultures, and we parent differently, we see things differently, but the law will be in place, and you'll say, Tim, you noticed that, your son noticed that, is that not being normal? To them, that might be normal, but now the law puts in place that this is what's normal in the UAE.
This is going to start a wider discussion on what is considered fair and how you should treat your children, which I think might be quite interesting. A lot of these stories will start to come up, even here on the text line, I'm sure. As you said, I saw a parent hit their child the other day. That may be unacceptable to you, but for that parent is completely acceptable, and I think it's going to start a wider dialogue, which I think should be really interesting.
And it all stemmed from the story of Wadima. It's informally called Wadima's Law, about a little girl who was tortured and killed by her father and left in the desert. And this created huge change from our leaders, and this is where we are today. Alex, I agree. Yeah.
Ultimately, it's a law that benefits children. Those are a few of the details. It comes into effect on June the 15th. Michelle Loxton looking at that story today. More details will follow, no doubt. For now, Michelle, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, then. It is Drive Live.
This is Drive Live with Tim Elliott and Alex Hershey.
On Dubai Eye 103.8.
It's Drive Live. Steve makes a very good point. Different countries find these child laws hard to police. How do you separate the well-intentioned neighbour from the busybody nosy park? And that's kind of where we were going with the question. It's a very, very difficult human issue. If you see a child being treated not as you would treat your children, there are various degrees there. It's a difficult one. I mean, there are very clear-cut cases of things that are unacceptable, no matter the culture, but then there are other, I suppose, lighter treatments. When we had a text in here, somebody saying light spanking should be allowed. Lots of parents would say, yes, light spanking should be. Personally, I don't think it should.
Really? So you've never kind of, I don't want to say hit your kids, but you've never kind of tapped them and said, no, that's wrong, or spanked them on their bottom or anything like that? But
do you know, honestly, my son never ever, he's 13 now, never ever, nothing at all. My daughter, I have to say, little tap once or twice. Not from me, more not...
When does it become?
Terrible thing to admit, but
when does it become a hit and not a tap? There's a distinction.
Well,
for you
therein
as well,
lies the rub. Obviously, I mean, it's very, very difficult to police something like this. And one, spanking. I've heard people saying, "Oh, you gave my child a beating." They don't mean a beating in the sense that I would understand a beating. They mean I slapped my child for this. Whether you think it's wrong or wrong, I'm not making the point that it is right or wrong. I'm just saying that was the expression used.
Yeah.
And beating wasn't what they were trying to get across. It's a really difficult one.
When I grew up, my parents would, hit me on the bottom if I was naughty, and that was just normal when I was growing. And do you know what? It was a lot better than what I faced at school, because when we went to school, there was still caning. So you would get to go to school, and if you were really naughty, you'd get sent to the principal's office.
You still had caning when you were at school?
We still had caning, yeah. Until I was probably about 12, so grade 7. They were still sending people down to the principal's office for a big caning. And also my grade 1 teacher, I remember telling my mum this story, because at the time I thought it was normal, but now looking back, I told her, and Mum said, you should have told me. Because as a child, you also don't know what is normal, right? So I got into class, grade 1, and when we were naughty, our teacher made us stand on our desks, and she would come around with the ruler and slap the ruler over our fingers, over our knuckles, and our joints on our feet.
With the thin ends?
With the ruler. Thin end, like straight over the knuckles.
Really?
Yeah, just whack us. And that's grade 1, that's 6 years old, and I thought that was normal.
That's what, 90s Australia?
Yes. Well, we're yet to catch up.
I'm thinking that's like 1880s Victorian London. That's Dickens stuff.
I mean, that's early 90s, but is that that's obviously not acceptable now. That's been phased out, but maybe it's still acceptable in some cultures to do that. And also with kids as well, do they know to report these things? As I didn't. I thought it was just normal, so maybe they get caught up in it. You don't report it to your parents, no one else sees, and then you end up being, in extreme cases, abused, and you don't even know where to go or what to say about it.
I'm really surprised at that. I had no idea it was like that. When I was at school in it feels like the 1870s. It was actually the 70s and the 80s. But
Did they have caning then, surely?
Yeah,
when you
I
went to
got
school?
I got slippered a couple of times. So they called it the slipper. It never felt like a slipper. It was like, you're gonna get the slipper, and you always think the slipper.
What was it? A big wooden stick?
No, it was it was a shoe. It was
a shoe?
Yeah, it is a shoe.
Was it a dirty shoe or?
I'm guessing it would have been.
Whose shoe was it? That's
when you
so
think
random.
about that, but I do remember at school at one point. So I remember a teacher threatening me with detention, and I thought, that's really the worst you can do. Oh dear! And that was the dawning of. There's not a lot you can do here.
Yeah.
But after a while, that took years. I wish I'd got that earlier, thinking about it. But you're right. Until that point, I didn't distinguish between. I just thought, oh, I've been bad. I will be
That's not normal.
potentially abused in some way. you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. So I think this is an interesting discussion. If you have any thoughts on this, 4001, would you report someone else? Would you report a parent if you thought they were doing the wrong thing, whether that be a neighbour or at the mall?
Yeah.
Let us know once this law comes into effect.
Yeah, well, the encouragement here, as we heard in those clips from Michelle earlier on, it is one of the things that the authorities hope will be encouraged is that sense of shared responsibility for children, which is a good thing, is a great thing, and is the right thing. But, different things are different with different people, and that's the issue we're trying to highlight.
That's right. 4001, we'd like to hear from you.